James always thought that I couldn't live without him. For 15 years of marriage, I had grown accustomed to being a wife, a pillar of support for his career. Every day, I devoted all my time to managing our home, bearing all responsibilities so that James could focus entirely on his work. I thought that was the way to maintain happiness, that it would make James cherish me more. But I was wrong. One afternoon, James came home earlier than usual. He sat on the couch, his eyes filled with disdain as he pushed a piece of paper in front of me. "I want a divorce," he said bluntly, as if it were just another business decision. "You don't contribute anything to my life. I need a woman who is more deserving." A woman who is more deserving? I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just smiled. A cold smile, one even I didn't recognize on my own face. James left, taking with him clothes and the luxury items he had bought with our money. He had no idea that I had long known about the suspicious transactions in our account, about the nights he was away with rushed excuses. Now, I no longer had to wonder what I had done wrong. The truth was clearer than ever. But James had underestimated me. He thought I was just a weak, submissive wife who would accept her fate. He didn't know that when trampled upon, anyone could become stronger than ever. After James left, I sat alone in the empty house, staring at the divorce papers on the table. There were no tears, no gut-wrenching pain like I had imagined. Just a strange emptiness. It felt like I had just escaped a nightmare that had lasted for 15 years. I got up, walked to the liquor cabinet, and poured myself a glass of red wine. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to relax. I turned on some soft music, leaned back on the sofa, and took slow sips of wine. I was no longer the woman who feared losing her husband. Now, I was a woman who had just been set free. I started thinking about the past, my youth, which I had sacrificed for James. I had given up my career, abandoned my dreams just to stand by him, believing that my love would be enough to keep him. But love cannot hold on to someone who does not appreciate it. James had betrayed me, and now I owed him nothing. I picked up my phone and logged into our joint bank account. The balance was nearly zero. James had been secretly withdrawing money for the past 6 months to prepare for his new life with his mistress. A surge of anger rose within me, but I quickly suppressed it. I wouldn't let my emotions control me. I needed to act. I immediately called the bank, requesting to freeze all joint accounts. I reported the suspicious transactions, asking them to investigate and block all funds James had taken. They promised to look into it and get back to me as soon as possible. Next, I called a lawyer. I needed the best one to ensure that James wouldn't get away with what he had done to me. My phone started ringing. James. 1 call, 2 calls, then 5. I didn't pick up. Then the messages started coming in. "Can we talk? What are you doing?" "Stop acting like a child." I only read them and left them unanswered. It was time for James to face the consequences of his actions. I took a deep breath and looked out the window. The city was as bustling as ever, but for me, everything had changed. I was no longer the woman I was yesterday. I was ready for a new life, a life without James. The first night alone felt strangely liberating. There was no James to criticize the way I cooked, no passive-aggressive remarks about my appearance, no tense silence filling the house like a thick fog. Just me, a glass of wine, and a playlist of songs I hadn't listened to in years. Songs James had once dismissed as too emotional or pointless. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. The next morning, I woke up with an unexpected sense of clarity. There was no sadness, no regret, just a newfound determination. James had walked away thinking I would crumble, thinking I would beg for him back. But he had no idea who he was dealing with. I dressed in my most confident outfit, one that James had always said was too flashy. I wore it anyway. Then I walked straight into my bank's main branch. The manager greeted me with a polite smile, unaware of the fire burning in my chest. "I'd like to go over my account statements again," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I want a full audit of every transaction my husband has made in the last year." The manager hesitated but nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Carter. We can arrange that." It didn't take long for the truth to unfold before me. James had not only been withdrawing money behind my back, but had also opened secret credit lines in both our names. He had used those funds to pay for extravagant vacations, expensive jewelry, and, of course, the luxurious apartment he had moved into with his mistress. My fists clenched under the table. He really thought he could steal from me and get away with it. "I'd like to dispute these transactions," I said coolly, "and I'd like to report potential financial fraud." The bank staff exchanged glances, suddenly realizing the gravity of the situation. "We'll investigate immediately," the manager assured me, "and we'll freeze any suspicious accounts." Good. As I walked out of the bank, the first wave of satisfaction washed over me. James had expected me to be weak, to be too broken to fight back. But he had underestimated me, just like he always had. The next step was securing my future. I had spent years sacrificing my career for James, but that didn't mean I was helpless. With my college degree and years of managing our household finances, I had more skills than I had given myself credit for. It was time to put them to use. I spent the next week sending out job applications, rewriting my resume, and reaching out to old friends and acquaintances. I even signed up for a few online courses to sharpen my skills. James had once scoffed at the idea of me working, saying it was unnecessary since he made enough money for both of us. But I refused to let him dictate my worth any longer. By the end of the second week, I had secured an interview with a well-known financial consulting firm. The hiring manager, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "You've been out of the workforce for a while, but your financial management experience is impressive. What made you decide to return now?" I met her gaze steadily. "Let's just say I'm finally reclaiming what's mine." She studied me for a moment, then smiled. "I like your confidence. We'll be in touch." I left the office feeling lighter than I had in years. James, meanwhile, was spiraling. His calls had become relentless, his messages more desperate. When he realized his bank accounts had been frozen, his anger turned into full-blown panic. "What the hell are you doing?" His latest message read, "You can't just take everything. We need to talk. Now." I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on building my new life. I found a cozy apartment downtown, far from the house that held too many painful memories. I furnished it exactly how I wanted. Modern, minimalist, with no trace of James in sight. It was my space, my sanctuary. I also joined a gym, something I had always wanted to do but had never gotten around to. James had once laughed at the idea, saying, "Why bother? It's not like you need to impress anyone." Well, James, I wasn't doing it for anyone else. I was doing it for me. Day by day, I felt stronger. My body, my mind, my spirit. All of it was healing. And the more I focused on myself, the less I thought about James. Until one day, I received an unexpected message. "Hi, this is Aurora. We need to talk." Aurora, James's mistress. I stared at the screen, a slow smile spreading across my lips. It seemed things weren't going as perfectly as James had planned. I didn't respond. Aurora's message sat unread on my phone for hours. I stared at it, debating whether to reply. A part of me wanted to ignore it entirely, to let James and his mistress destroy each other without my involvement. But another part, the part that had spent the last 15 years being underestimated, wanted to hear what she had to say. Curiosity won. I typed a short response. "What do you want?" Her reply came almost immediately. "Please, just meet me. It's important." I hesitated. Then, after a deep breath, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. Aurora looked nothing like the confident, alluring woman I had imagined. She looked exhausted. Her makeup was smudged, her blonde hair disheveled. She had dark circles under her eyes, and when she saw me, relief flashed across her face. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Get to the point." She flinched but nodded. "I made a mistake," she blurted. "I thought James was—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Different. I thought he loved me, but everything fell apart the moment he lost his job." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. At first, he told me it was temporary, that he'd fix things, that he still had money. But then the accounts froze, and he couldn't pay for anything anymore. She swallowed hard. That's when I saw the real James. He became angry, controlling. He started blaming me for everything. Her voice broke and she took a shaky breath. I kicked him out. He's been staying in a motel, begging me to take him back. But I'm done. I studied her. She was young, naive, and had fallen for the same lies I had once believed. Why are you telling me this? I asked. She bit her lip. Because he's not just desperate, he's dangerous. He keeps talking about how he'll fix everything. He said he's going to get his money back, one way or another, and I think he means you. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. He wants revenge, doesn't he? I murmured. Aurora nodded. He thinks you ruined his life. He's obsessed with getting back what he lost. I just thought you should know. For the first time since this all started, I felt a flicker of unease. I had been so focused on reclaiming my life that I hadn't considered how dangerous a desperate man could be. But if James thought he could intimidate me, he was dead wrong. That night, I reinforced the security of my apartment, double-checking the locks. I refused to let fear control me, but I wasn't stupid either. I also forwarded Aurora's warning to my lawyer just in case. Days passed. James's messages continued, but now they carried an edge of rage. You think you've won? You think you can just erase me? You took everything from me, but I'm not done yet. And then, one night, I found him waiting outside my apartment building. He looked terrible. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, his expensive suit now wrinkled and dirty. But what scared me wasn't his appearance. It was the manic glint in his eyes. We need to talk, he said. No, I said flatly, stepping back. He grabbed my wrist. You owe me a conversation. After everything, I owe you nothing. My voice was steady, but my heart pounded. Let go of me. He tightened his grip. You ruined my life. You think you can just walk away from this? From me? I yanked my arm free. That's exactly what I'm doing. I turned and walked away, not sparing him another glance. My hands shook, but I kept my posture straight until I reached the safety of my apartment. That night, I made a decision. James wanted to play games? Fine. I would end this once and for all. I gathered every last piece of evidence I had, bank statements, fraudulent transactions, proof of his affair, and the messages he had sent threatening me. I compiled it all into a neat package and sent it to 3 places: my lawyer, his former company's legal department, and the local authorities. If James wanted a war, I was prepared to finish it. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Former executive James Carter under investigation for financial fraud. Authorities looking into allegations of embezzlement and misconduct. I smiled. James had spent his whole life believing he was untouchable, that he could manipulate, cheat, and betray without consequences. But this time, he had underestimated the wrong woman. James always thought he was invincible. A powerful, wealthy man who could manipulate everything to his advantage. But the truth was, he was nothing more than a fraud. And people like him always face consequences sooner or later. After I sent the financial evidence of James's fraudulent activities to his former company, everything crumbled fast. Not only was he fired, but the company also cooperated with the police to investigate the embezzled funds he had secretly taken over the years. He had no way to escape because all his accounts had been frozen. Even his closest connections slowly abandoned him. A week later, James was summoned to the police station. Every major news outlet covered the scandal. I saw his image on the screen, a man looking worn out, hollow, stripped of his once arrogant demeanor. But this was far from the final punishment awaiting him. One morning, as I was about to leave my apartment, a message from an unknown number popped up. Please, just meet me once. It was James. I stared at the screen. A strange feeling crept over me. He had discarded me without hesitation. Yet now, when he had nothing left, he was begging for a meeting. I didn't reply. But James didn't give up. In the following days, the calls and messages kept coming. He said he regretted everything. He said he couldn't live without me. He begged for my forgiveness. But I was no longer the weak woman I used to be. I deleted every message. A month later, James's trial officially began. I had the choice not to attend, but I still went. Not because I wanted to see him suffer, but because I wanted to witness justice being served. As I stepped into the courtroom, James's eyes immediately searched for mine. For a brief moment, I saw panic, desperation, and a silent plea within them. But I no longer cared. The trial lasted for hours. The company's lawyers continuously presented undeniable evidence of James's embezzlement. His lies were exposed one after another. And when the judge finally delivered the verdict, 5 years in prison without parole, I watched as he collapsed into his chair, drained of all strength. That was the moment I knew I had truly won. After the trial, I stepped outside and took a deep breath. The sky was unusually clear today. The warm sunlight wrapped around me. Finally, after everything, I was truly free. I once thought I couldn't live without James, but in the end, it was him who couldn't survive without me. And now, I no longer cared about him. The day James was taken away in handcuffs was the last time I ever thought about him with any real emotion. His name used to consume my thoughts, first with love, then with pain, then with anger. But now, his name meant nothing, just a remnant of the past, a story I had already finished writing. 6 months had passed since the trial. My divorce was finalized, and I received a significant financial settlement. It wasn't about the money, though. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, about ensuring that the years I had invested in that marriage weren't in vain. I moved into a bigger apartment, one that truly felt like home. Every inch of it reflected me, my taste, my freedom, my new life. I redecorated it with warm tones, elegant furniture, and fresh flowers that filled the space with life. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Work was going exceptionally well. After proving myself, I was promoted. And for the first time in my life, I truly enjoyed what I did. No longer was I just James's wife. I was me, independent and thriving. One evening, as I was having dinner with friends at a rooftop restaurant, I received an unexpected message. Can we talk? Just once? I need closure. James. I stared at the message, feeling nothing. Closure, that's what he wanted. I thought about it for a few moments, then I typed my response. I found my closure the moment I walked away. You should do the same. I hit send and never looked back. James was no longer a part of my story. His chapter was closed, locked away in a book I had no interest in reopening. Instead, I focused on the life ahead of me. I traveled. I explored places I had once only dreamed of. I laughed with new friends, created new memories, and embraced every moment of freedom. I fell in love again, not with a man, but with life itself. And for the first time in a long time, I knew, without a doubt, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I had won. Not against James, but against the version of myself who once believed she wasn't enough. Because now I knew better. And I would never let anyone take that away from me again.